Every crime leaves a file. Some are closed, some are forgotten, and some are never allowed to rest. Welcome to a true crime case file. Today's story begins on a frozen lake, with a missing man, a delayed phone call, and a marriage that looked perfect, until investigators discovered what was hidden beneath the surface. The water was completely still that morning. February 13th, 2018. Lake Silvermere stretched out beneath a pale winter sky, the kind of cold that turns every breath into smoke. A small fishing boat drifted near the shore. Inside it sat a woman alone. Her husband was gone, and for nearly 2 hours, she did nothing. No call for help, no distress signal, no witnesses. 2 hours passed before she finally dialed 911. By the time rescuers arrived, the sunrise she and her husband had planned to watch together was long gone, and so was Michael Harris. The woman on the boat was Rebecca Harris. She was shaking, she had a bloody nose, and she told police a simple story. A romantic morning on the lake, a mechanical issue with the boat, Michael leaning forward to investigate, a sudden fall into the freezing water, a tragic accident. But from the very beginning, investigators noticed something strange. Rebecca waited nearly 2 hours to call for help. In water that cold, survival is measured in minutes, and nothing about her story quite added up. Michael Harris was known as a disciplined man. Born in 1950, he spent his life building things slowly and carefully, his career, his finances, his family. He worked in the timber industry, eventually rising to an executive position. He believed in hard work, personal responsibility, and honesty. He raised his 2 children with those same values. Friends described him as practical, frugal, and deeply loyal. And when Michael remarried later in life, he believed he had found peace. He trusted his wife completely. He had no idea that trust would one day cost him his life. Rebecca Harris came from a very different background. She grew up in poverty, moving frequently, never knowing stability. As an adult, she reinvented herself. She became warm, charismatic, dependable. She was deeply involved in community work and eventually became the executive director of a nonprofit housing organization. To the outside world, Rebecca was admired, a leader, a volunteer of the year, a woman who helped others rebuild their lives. What no one knew was that behind the image, another story was quietly unfolding. The morning before Valentine's Day, Michael and Rebecca left their home before sunrise. They planned to watch the dawn break over Lake Silvermere, then go out for breakfast. According to Rebecca, everything was normal at first. Then she said the motor malfunctioned. Michael leaned forward. She claimed he looked confused, almost disoriented. Then he went into the water. What happened next would become the center of the investigation. Rebecca didn't call for help. She waited. She searched, she said. She hoped, she said. Nearly 2 hours passed before she called 911. Michael's body was recovered from the lake over 2 weeks later. At first, investigators expected drowning, but the autopsy told a different story. Michael Harris did not drown. The cause of death was diphenhydramine toxicity, a massive overdose of Benadryl. The amount found in his blood was far beyond any normal or accidental dose. This was not a medical event. This was not an accident. It was a homicide. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered something Michael never knew. For years, Rebecca had been embezzling money from the nonprofit she ran. Fake invoices, shell companies, funds diverted into accounts connected to her children. More than $500,000 had been stolen. Federal investigators were closing in, and the timing was critical. Michael was about to find out. Prosecutors would later argue that Rebecca's carefully constructed life was on the verge of collapse, and she couldn't allow that to happen. Investigators uncovered disturbing details. Google searches about drowning in water currents. A text message sent from Michael's phone after his disappearance, containing an emoji. Friends said Michael never used emojis. Rebecca did. Then there was a will. Handwritten changes appeared after Michael's death. Changes that would shift the majority of his assets to Rebecca's children. Nothing had been legally finalized. It looked like planning. Rebecca was arrested and charged federally for embezzlement first. The evidence was overwhelming. She pleaded guilty and was sentenced to prison. Then came the murder charge. In 2020, Rebecca Harris was charged with first-degree murder. The case never went to trial. Instead, she entered an offered plea to second-degree murder. Acknowledging the prosecution had enough evidence to convict without fully admitting guilt. At sentencing, Rebecca claimed the poison was meant for herself. The judge rejected that explanation. The evidence told a different story. She was sentenced to life in prison, with decades before parole eligibility. Michael's children stood in court and spoke of loss without closure. Rebecca's own daughter spoke out against her, describing manipulation and betrayal. Families were shattered. Trust was gone. The lake remained. Silent. Unchanged. Lake Silvermere still reflects the sky each morning. The water doesn't remember what happened. But Michael Harris's family does. He was more than a victim. He was a father, a grandfather, a man who believed in doing things the right way. Some stories don't end cleanly, but telling them matters. This has been a true crime case file. If you value in-depth storytelling that respects the people behind the headlines, consider subscribing, because every crime leaves a file, and some are never meant to be forgotten.